Great, thank you, Kylie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Perfect. So I just wanted to give a quick update. You can go to the next slide. So just a recap on what we've done on Kauai for turmeric efforts. This was our replicated trial that we harvested in 2020. And next slide, please. And you can see similar to what we found in some of the other sites, that Roma was, again, the highest yielder and really the standout on a yield basis. And that BKK, as Ted mentioned, was the lowest yielding in our trial as well, although it does have that really remarkably high curcuminoid content, giving it additional value for folks who are interested, especially for the medicinal purposes. And we weren't able to plant in 2020 because of some labor shortages around COVID. But if you go to the next slide, please. We were able to replant this year in 2021, and we did the same 6 varieties that we had in our previous trial and added 2 of the numbered accessions, the 18-013 and 18-023 for the replicated trial this year. If you can, I believe, next slide, please. Perfect. You're right, great. So there's definitely a lot of interest in turmeric and some of the related curcuma species here on Kauai as well. So we're really happy to have this trial going. These are some recent photos. The plants just started flowering, and we're expecting to have our harvest in March of 2022. Again, with these 8 varieties in the replicated, and then a lot of the related species in the border rows to keep those going and make sure that the germplasm is available for local growers who are interested. And we'll keep you posted. Hopefully we can do an in-person field day when March rolls around next year. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Emilie, yeah, and thank you, Kylie. Kylie, did you have some additional slides?
That is the end of the turmeric update.
Okay, we'll keep moving just for in the interest of time. So thank you for that. We're gonna keep Emilie up here so she could talk to us about innovative project looking at living cages for cacao as alternatives for wire cages. So I'll turn it over to Emilie.
All right, thanks, Ted. Let me pull the share screen up real quick. All right, can everybody see the presentation in the full screen? Yeah, okay, perfect. And sorry, I realize you can't see me for some reason, but I'm here.
That's okay.
Okay.
I was gonna say it's a tiny bit off center. I don't know if it's for everybody.
Let's see.
I don't know if we can see the whole thing.
Oops.
But so there we go.
How about now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. All right, great. Thank you, everyone. So my name's Emilie Kirk. I'm the extension agent with the SOAP team based on Kauai. And I wanted to share a little bit about a proof of concept trial that we did looking at alternatives for cacao establishment. And this is also in the most recent version of the Hanai if you want to read the full details on the trial. So young cacao trees are especially vulnerable to defoliation from things like feeding damage from Chinese rose beetles. It's a really common pest that affects a lot of crops, and also from windburn in particular. The cacao is quite sensitive. So when we're starting new orchards, the common practice to avoid these issues is to use constructed wire tree shelters or cages of some type. And previous work from Dr. Skip Bittenbender, he trialed various different materials and also sizes of shelters or cages to see which ones were most effective and had the best growth. And he was recommending, especially for rainy or shaded areas, to use clear film or 50% shade cloth for sunny areas. mostly the cages tend to be, as you can kind of see in the photo, they're about 3 feet tall, and he recommended 10 inches diameter. But as interest in cacao continues to grow, and we see that orchard sizes are really increasing as well, the material costs for the wire, if you're using shade cloth or plastic, and the time that it takes to assemble them also increases. So it really adds up if you're trying to put in a large planting of hundreds of trees. So we were looking at this idea, would it be possible to use cover crops instead of building these constructed tree shelters to protect the young cacao trees during planting? And so this trial we conducted at the Kauai Agriculture Research Center, which is based in Wailua on the east side of Kauai. We're at about 530 feet, and we get about 100 inches a year of rainfall. And the trial was put in, so even though we do get a lot of rain and cloud cover up here, we had no shade. So it was almost like a full sun trial, although I've been told Wailua does not have full sun. And so what this looked like on the ground, we chose 2 cover crops to use, pigeon pea and also sun hemp. They're some of the more common crops that are grown and integrated with cacao systems. And we planted rings of the cover crop to mimic the constructed cages. And then we also did a treatment where we just broadcast the sun hemp seed as well into the plot. And each plot was a 10 by 10, 10 foot by 10 foot with 1 UH4 cacao seedling transplanted into the center. So for a timeline, we started this cacao seedlings in the greenhouse in December of 2019, and we initially seeded the cover crop. Our plan was to transplant them in February 2020, but they did not do very well on transplanting. So we ended up reseeding that cover crop in April, transplanting the cacao in July. So you can think it's about six or 7 months that those seedlings were in the greenhouse. And then we terminated the project 3 months later. And the photo on the left here shows we used bird netting to cover the cover crops when it was being established in the field, because we have quite high bird pressure up here. And just to show a top view of what that looks like. So on the left, you see the kind of conventional wire tree cage with a 50% shade cloth, and then the pigeon pea ring and the sun hemp ring on the far right. And those rings were about 2-inch diameter, because we anticipated the plants would grow in as well. And the tree cage is about 1 foot. So again, those treatments we have, for comparison, we left some of those trees uncaged. So it's a no cage and no cover crop treatment. We used the conventional wire cage with the 50% black shade cloth, and those are about 1 foot diameter cages. A sun hemp broadcast in the 10 by 10, sun hemp ring, and a pigeon pea ring. And here's a photo so you can see what once the project was installed, just shortly after planting. And you notice in this photo that the sun hemp is already much taller than the pigeon pea, even at this point. So some results from the trial. We terminated the experiment when the no cage, no cover, those unprotected trees were almost completely defoliated. So that ended up being late September 2020. You can see the photo on the far right. This is from the end of July. So this poor little tree is almost completely defoliated, even after just about a month of being in the field with no shelter. The photo in the middle, it looks a little bit like a jungle, but this is one of the sun hemp broadcast plots with the cacao tree tucked in there in the middle, and then a pigeon pea ring again with the cacao tree in the middle. And these photos are from September, so you can see that they were much better sheltered from the wind, although there were some other challenges I'll address in a second. Also, by the time we terminated the trial at the end of September, the sun hemp had mostly died back by that time. So even though it was faster growing and grew taller than the pigeon pea early on, it was not as long-lived. So some results, we looked at cacao tree height at the final point of data collection, and there are no letters on this graph because there were no significant differences among any of the treatments. There were some qualitative differences, however, in the defoliation, as you saw in the previous photos, and this would likely have an effect on the long-term tree survival had we let the project continue. Also, we were hoping to look at the Chinese rose beetle damage and to create an indices for that, but there was no beetle damage that was observed on any of the cacao trees in this trial, although we did see some damage on the pigeon pea, so we know that the beetle was present in the area. So some of the challenges, timing was a big one for us. So the photo on the left here is actually from Dr. Skip Bittenbender's work, and he's showing direct seeded plants with their very nice straight taproots compared to these kind of J-rooted examples on the right side, where these were plants that were in their pots in the nursery too long. Just kind of pointing out the challenges and also the risk of growing plants in the greenhouse. And in this case, I would guess that our plants were held probably too long. 6 or 7 months is quite a long time to be in a 1 gallon container for a tree. Weed management was also challenging. So because we had the broadcast and in the cover crop treatment for the sun hemp, there was not really a way to get in there and weed. I guess the idea was that the cover crop itself would control the weeds, and they didn't, especially as the sun hemp started to die back. So that was a confounding factor. And the other one was about spacing. So the far right photo, you can barely see, there's a little cacao tree right in the middle. That is a top view from one of the pigeon pea rings where it had just grown in much too close, and the tree is well protected from the wind, but it's also not getting a whole lot of light in there either. So for some ideas for future study, the pigeon pea does seem promising. There might even be a possible trap crop effect for Chinese rose beetle. The photo on the left is showing that rose beetle feeding damage on the pigeon pea, as we mentioned. But again, timing and maintaining plant vigor, both for the cover crop and for the cacao trees, is very important. And so managing both of those adds an extra complicating factor, as well as spacing, remembering that that pigeon pea can get quite bushy and quite large. And we may consider direct seeding. This is common practice in the industry also, planting multiple cacao seeds and then thinning back to the most vigorous one. But I think there's a lot of interest in cacao. It's definitely a growing industry in the state as well, and a lot of potential for value added. So this is an area that we want to continue working on. This was an unfunded trial, but as we have the opportunity, we're going to keep working with these crops also. And with that, I'd say mahalo nui for your time. And this is a photo, also an ongoing trial we have looking at 10 different grafted varieties of cacao at the station here in Wailua. So plenty of space and plenty of opportunity to continue this other work with this crop.
Thank you, Emilie. Appreciate that. I don't see any questions in the chat. We'll keep moving. I appreciate all the speakers making up some of the time. So we're almost on time. So thank you for that. We're up next.